All right, you guys, let's close it up. Part 3, we're going to cover the rest of it in this one. So we're still in chapter 22. We just finished up where Jesus was praying. He's sweating blood. The disciples were sleeping when they should have been praying. And so now the prayer sesh is over and it's about to go down. So the crowd approaches and they are with Judas, and Judas betrays him with a kiss. The disciples are getting super defensive, like, Lord, should we fight? And one of them goes and slices off the ear of the high priest's slave. And so Jesus is like, what are you doing? Right? And he goes and puts his hand over the guy's ear and completely heals and restores it. These people that came for Jesus are like as if they're picking up some criminal, right? They're coming with all these different weapons. And Jesus is like, am I some dangerous revolutionary? He asked, that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me. Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day, but this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns. This didn't happen because Jesus was caught off guard. It happened because this is how it needed to happen. Let's not forget the many times they tried to get Jesus and he got away. So it's not because now Jesus was backed into a corner. It's because now was the time. I'm going to read some of the notes here. It says, a kiss was and still is the traditional greeting among men in certain parts of the world. In this case, it was also the agreed upon signal to point out Jesus. It is ironic that a gesture of greeting would be the means of betrayal. It was a hollow gesture because of Judas's treachery. Have any of your religious practices become empty gestures? We still betray Christ when our acts of service or giving are insincere or carried out merely for show. I didn't even think about that when I was reading that passage, that would be something that I needed to pay attention to, but they bring up a very good point. There are times, right? Like sometimes we're going through the motions and we don't even realize it. Let's try to be mindful of that. Are we in it when we're doing these things, when we're praying, when we're worshiping, whatever it is? Like, is our heart actually there, or are we just like going through the motions? Because if we're just going through the motions, it's super hollow, and that's not what God wants. He's not asking us to go through this checklist of things, right? We learned about this already. He's after our heart, and if our heart's not in it, it's empty. You don't want that. He goes on to say, the religious leaders had not arrested Jesus in the temple for fear of a riot. Instead, they came secretly at night under the influence of the power of darkness, Satan himself. Although it looked as if Satan was getting the upper hand, everything was proceeding according to God's plan. It was time for Jesus to die. So just like I was saying earlier, right? Like, it didn't happen because they happened to catch Jesus off guard, and so now he can't get away. He is God. If he wanted to up and vanish, he would. But this is how it needed to happen. He's here to fulfill the prophecy. He's here to save us. And now was the time for it to happen. Now we're getting into Peter's actual betrayal. So the guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. So Peter was hanging off to the side, hiding, and now that they have this fire, he's coming to join them. Maybe it was cold. I don't know. So, people notice him and they know right away that he was with Jesus. So they're like, no, he's with this guy. And he's like, no, I don't know him. And he denies him 3 times, right? And so finally it says man, I don't know what you are talking about. And immediately while he was still speaking, this was the 3rd time, a rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. This is verse 61. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. So Peter and Judas betrayed him. I think, we often look at it as just Judas that betrayed him, but so did Peter. But it doesn't stop there, right? Because they both betrayed Jesus, but only one of them repented. And that was Peter. He came back even stronger. He became the rock upon which Jesus built his kingdom on. This is good stuff. This is redemption. It says Peter's experiences in the next few hours would change his life. He would change from a half-hearted follower to a repentant disciple, and finally to the kind of person Christ could use to build his church. He goes on to say that he wept bitterly, not only because he realized that he had denied his Lord, the Messiah, but also because he had turned away from a very dear friend, a person who had loved and taught him for 3 years, who saw him as he was all the way through to the person that he became. This is somebody super significant in his life. Because Peter had said that he would never deny Christ despite Jesus' prediction. But when he was frightened, he went against all he had boldly promised. When we're scared, we respond out of fear, and it's not always what we wish we would have done. This is what happened with Peter. Unable to stand up for his Lord for even 12 hours, He had failed as a disciple and as a friend. We need to be aware of our own breaking points and not become overconfident or self-sufficient, right? Take that self-inventory. If we fail him, we must remember that Christ can use those who recognize their failure. From this humiliating experience, Peter learned much that would help him later when he assumed leadership of the young church. So where the enemy is rejoicing because Peter betrayed him, what the enemy meant for evil, God made for good. God used it to strengthen him, to fully equip him for what his ministry was going to become. And he can do that with you, and he can and has done it with me. Now Jesus is with all the high priests. We saw how they were treating him. I'm not going to go much into that detail. I explained in the last video about the ton of imagery and how uncomfortable it is to watch, but I would argue that's still very necessary for us to really take in what he did for us. It wasn't a quick thing and he got over it because we didn't see it. We're kind of removed from it. But it was brutal. It was evil. It was awful. It was awful. And he did that for us. And so anyway, so I'm going to go on to the last part of this chapter. It says, this is when they're all like questioning him, right? And so they're like, tell us you're the Messiah. So Jesus is like, well, if I tell you, you won't believe me. If I ask you a question, you're not going to answer it. So he's between a rock and a hard place. So very stubborn-minded people. They only want one specific outcome to listen to or to hear him say so that they can arrest him, and it would be, within their rights for the law that they have. And so he goes, so you are claiming to be the Son of God. In my text, it says, and he replied, you say that I am. And so when I read that, from my perspective, in this millennium, I think of it as like, oh, well, you're the one who says that I am. But the key word here is I am, and that is actually God's name. And so it's actually far deeper than just, well, you're the one that said it, not me. He ends up using the actual phrase of God's name, and that's why they got so riled up again. And they were like, we just heard him say it for ourselves. And so boom, they went to arrest him. So I'm going to get into some of these notes about that. It says, Jesus in effect agreed that he was the Son of God when he simply turned the high priest question around by saying, you say that I am. And Jesus identified himself with God by using a familiar title for God found in the Old Testament. This is the one that I'm talking about. It says, I am. And you can see this in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. This is so significant. This is how God identifies himself in the Old Testament with Moses. These are like big events. And so this is what the religious leaders stand on. Nobody can say those words, I am. So again, it's more than just, oh, you said it, not me. It's far deeper than that. So it goes, the high priest recognized Jesus's claim and could now accuse him of blasphemy. For any other human, this claim would have been blasphemy. But in this case, Jesus spoke the truth. Blasphemy, which is the sin of claiming to be God or of attacking God's authority and majesty in any way, it was punishable by death. The Jewish leaders had the evidence they wanted. So from here, he's just going to go into trial. That's chapter 23. So stay tuned for that one. It's getting heavy, you guys. I'm trying to not cry when I do these videos. So I hope this stuff is helpful. If you had any other thoughts while you're listening, drop that stuff in the comments. I want to hear about it. I want to know what goes through your mind when you're hearing these things. Maybe something popped up that I didn't think about. And again, my name is Denise with Misfit of Creation. Be sure to check out my Etsy shop. There's a ton of downloadable Bible studies. There's devotionals, study charts, prayer request cards, all kinds of tools to help you strengthen your relationship with Christ. I also have a podcast where new episodes are dropping every Tuesday. It's called Prodigal Peas in a Pod. You can find us on any platform where podcasts are streaming. And so thanks for watching. If you want to be a financial supporter, you can go to my Patreon. I'm going to drop that one just below, and I'll see you for chapter 23.